Continue our study in the Gospel of John, and this morning we've arrived at chapter 6. So if you remember the last time we were together, we were going through John, we were in chapter 5. There's the man healed after being lame for 38 years, and we saw how Jesus kind of chooses that man because the man ends up turning Jesus into the authorities very quickly once he figures out that there's pressure on this guy, and they're like, who did this healing? And so he's, it's Jesus, he did it, which is kind of a bizarre way to say thank you. And what that led to is Jesus, for like 40 verses, laying out his deity over and over and over and over. Why I bring that up is that put that miracle in kind of a different context for me. I've always kind of thought of it as, wow, he healed a guy, lame for 38 years. What we find is the guy wasn't seeking healing. He didn't express any great faith. He wasn't necessarily a good guy. Jesus used that miracle as a springboard to say what he wanted to say to the leaders. With that in mind, John 20:30-31, we looked at it a lot. It's the summary of why John is writing. And in verse 31, but these things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So when you understand that the point John is doing when he's writing is he wants to help us see that Jesus is God. So he tells about that miracle and then what happens after that because it fulfills this purpose. Okay? So with that in mind, I want us to look at one of the most famous miracles, which is the feeding of the 5,000. And in order to set that up, we're going to read through the other Gospels accounts, not really of the feeding of the 5,000, but of what led up to that. In John, he goes straight from these statements of his deity straight into the feeding of the 5,000. But there's a lot of context to what's happening just prior to that I think would be helpful for us to see. So we're going to look at Luke and Mark and Matthew just to kind of help us set the stage as we move into this passage from John. So I'm going to have one of you read, and I'll just three readers, three screens. They're all different, the three different gospel accounts. So if somebody would read this one for us.
And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. And he said to them, take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And wherever they do not receive you, when you leave that town, shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. And they departed and went through the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard about all that was happening, and he was perplexed, because it was said by some that John had been raised from the dead, by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the prophets of old had risen. Herod said, John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things? And he sought to see them. On their return, the apostles told him all they had done. And he took them and withdrew apart to a town called Bethsaida.
So first thing would be, they've gone out on this missionary journey, so to speak. He sends them out in pairs. was talked about earlier, you're doing teaching or training and it's not your thing, it can be very emotionally draining and just kind of wears you out. I think of that with these guys. They're off healing and teaching, and that's an exhausting thing. And so they come back, and then Herod has just killed John the Baptist, who was a relative of Jesus. Jesus finds that out. So here comes the exhausted disciples, apostles, which will be apostles. And John the Baptist has just been beheaded by Herod. And he then takes them and they go to this town called Bethsaida. Bethsaida is a town near the northeast corner, so to speak, of the Sea of Galilee. And so that's kind of a setup for that. Now let's look at Mark. Somebody read that one for us.
The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd.
So in one passage we're told they go to Bethsaida, and then this passage we're told they go to a desolate place. So it would be like on the outskirts of Bethsaida, in a more empty setting, the sides of a hill near the water. That's kind of the setting on this. But what I wanted you to see here is, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So they've come back, they're exhausted, and there's just constant people there. And they just, think of a party at your house, and it can be really exhausting, and then the people just won't leave, and it's 3 days later and they're all still sitting in your living room, and you're like, right? That's kind of what's happening here. And it's like, okay, let's just go, let's get away, let's go and rest. So that's the objective. Now let's look at Matthew. Oh, do I have the wrong passage? No, that's fine. Okay, go ahead. Whoever wants to read that one.
And his disciples came and took the body and buried it. And they went and told Jesus. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to the desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick.
So what's happening here, and his disciples came and took the body and buried it. That's John the Baptist they're taking. So this is very fresh. This has just happened. And then they went and told Jesus. And when Jesus heard this, when he hears that John the Baptist has been killed and now buried, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. Not by himself as in he's the only one there, but with just him and his disciples. He's off doing that. We hear that from the other passages. And I think he is going to go off by himself eventually as well. That happens at the very end of this story of the feeding of the thousands. He then goes off by himself without even the disciples. So when you start mixing these together, you kind of get a more complete picture. Again, crowds, compassion. Now we're seeing not only does he feed them, we'll see that in a moment, he's also healing the sick as well. So what I want you to see here is this is a jam-packed 24, 48, 36 hours, whatever that time frame is. These guys have come back, they're exhausted. There's just people everywhere, they can't get a breath. They find out John the Baptist has been killed, and they try to go away and get some rest. And that's the setup for the story that we're now going to look at here in John. One of you go ahead and read this one.
After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?"
So I want to start with a question. Why does Jesus need to feed the people? Why does he even need to do that? He doesn't do that in all these other stories. He's not feeding. There is another time where he feeds 4,000, but my point is, up to this point, he hasn't been like the catering service. Why does he even need to do that? So I want you to think about that as we kind of walk through this. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They're in Capernaum area on the northwest. They get in the boat, they go to the northeast corner over by Bethsaida. And it is the Sea of Galilee, but it has had kind of a name change, which is now called Sea of Tiberias. We think that's like by the time John is writing this, he's connecting those two names to make sure that people would know it by either name. And a large crowd followed him because they had saw the signs he was doing on the sick. So he had been healing all these people, and so when they see him headed that way, hey, everybody, let's go there. I don't think they have an anticipation of eating. They're following the show. You know, we want to go and be where he's at. Go ahead.
Because now that John the Baptist has been killed, so then they needed a new.
Sort of, but John the Baptist didn't heal anybody, so
but
it's
he
not.
Baptize people. Correct?
No. They are following him because he's a miracle worker. It's phenomenal. He's doing things no one's ever seen. That's why I say they're going for the show.
So how
in
old
part.
would Jesus have been at that time? In his
30s.
30s.
Early 30s, yeah. All right. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. So they get there, they get out of the boats, they go up, and then the crowds are gathering. He tells us that, I don't know what I did there, I shifted my slider a little bit. Now the Passover of the feast of the Jews was at hand. That's simply to give us a time reference. It's in the spring is when this is occurring. It's not related to Passover, but now we know this has occurred in the spring. Lifting up his eyes then and seeing the crowd coming toward him. So this is all kind of just setting the stage. They're there. And what I want you to get from what I have said thus far is we have exhausted disciples that are just kind of overrun with all these people. They've decided to go away and get some rest, which is much needed. And here come the crowds. And what does Jesus do in that moment? He turns to Philip. I'm showing you this just as a reminder. There's no time to breathe here. Before I go to the part about Philip, let me show you this. Why does Jesus need to feed the people? Because he had gone away to a place where food was not readily accessible. He's setting the stage. He's creating the problem, is my point. He goes into this desolate situation where there's nowhere to get food, knowing that they're going to follow him. This is back from Mark. Now, many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So he knows this. He's God, right? He understands that. So not only is he going where there's no food readily available, he knows that the people will follow. Why? Because they keep following. No matter where he goes, they keep showing up. So he creates this problem. He gets to a desolate, isolated place. Everybody's exhausted. And they're in a situation. So why does Jesus feed the people? Different question. Not why does he need to. We can see why he needs to. There's no food there and there's all these people. So why does he this time decide to feed the people? And it's compassion, right? We see that here in the Mark passage. And he had compassion on them. So for one reason, and I think this is what the most common one we all think of, well, he fed them because he's compassionate. He's Jesus. He would do that. That would be a reason. But let me go back now to our main passage. Exhausted, harried, they've gone to escape. Here come the crowds. And Jesus, instead of just solving it, Jesus said to Peter, "Where are we to buy bread so these people may eat?" And Philip's like, what? That just created a whole nother problem. I don't think Philip was worried about how to feed people. They've never done that. Jesus just says, so how are we going to feed all these people? What do you mean? Do you get the dilemma, right? That's what I'm saying. Jesus is creating this problem by the setting, and he's creating the problem he's the one that brings it up. And he's not telling the disciples, here's what we're going to do. He's asking them, hey, how are we going to solve this problem? Oh, shoot, I didn't even know we had a problem. Now we have a really big problem. He said this to test him. So I'm not reading into this that he's done this. He's telling us in the scripture, this was a test of the disciples. That is what's going on. And he's not just testing Philip. He asks Philip, but all of them are there. And we see how the response is from Andrew here in a moment. So, and the reason he tests him is for he himself knew what he would do. There is no problem. He's going to solve the problem. They don't know that yet. And so he's building in them this, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? And then he's just going to deal with it. But he wants them to have that emotional connection to, this is like insurmountable. Why does God put us in the spot where we have an insurmountable problem? Is he not smart enough to avoid those? No, he's wise enough to put us right in the middle of those, is the point. Because we are the ones who gain from being in the midst of an insurmountable problem that then he solves. So, Philip answers him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each to get a little. 200 denarii. This is like saying $50,000 wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's a throwaway line. It's not that he's doing math and going, oh, so there's this many people times the bread costs this. It's not that. It's a line of a lot of money is what he's saying here. The parable where the man is forgiven $1 billion type thing, but then he's not willing to forgive a debt of 100 denarii, right? A denarii is a specific thing. It's a day's wage. So 100 denarii is 40% of your annual income. He was unwilling to forgive, in that other parable, 100 days worth of work, 40% of your income. That changes that parable a bit. By the way, it's like, I always thought it was like a measly $20 he wouldn't. No. He loaned his brother-in-law $20,000 or $30,000, and now the brother-in-law is stiffing him. And all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, that's me. I'm the guy that wouldn't forgive that. You see what I'm saying? Same concept here, only it's bigger than that. It's 200 denarii. It's 200 days wages. You can work 250 to 300 days a year. It's a lot of money, is what his point is. And that wouldn't even be enough to give a little bit of food to everybody. Now, why would that be? How big is this crowd that 200 days wages wouldn't hardly touch the problem? We'll get to that in a moment. So why does Jesus feed the people? First, compassionate. Second, he wanted the disciples to see him meet this insurmountable need. He's setting up this whole scenario for the disciples. Who are the disciples? Well, it's not just the 12. There's more, the true disciples, but it's also for us so that we see this. There's this insurmountable problem and he solves that. So let's sidetrack just a little bit here. Does God bring trials into our life when we are being obedient? Yes, very much so. Job, classic example, right? A righteous man. And it goes through this incredible situation. So the answer would be yes, of course, but let's look at that a little bit. He says this to test him. I want you to see this word test here. He said this to test him, that word test. It's a specific Greek word, and it's used a lot in the New Testament. And I want you to see that here. This is James 1:13. It says, "Let no one say when he is tempted," and it is the exact same Greek word. So that Greek word can be translated either test or tempt, or tried is another, like a trial, a tried, somebody's being tried. That's the same word, and here it says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But he tests, but he doesn't tempt. It's the same word. It's like, wait a minute. You see the conflict here? He specifically says he's testing, and here it says he doesn't ever do that. And the reason is motive. The reason is motive. Satan tempts with the motive of having you fall, and God tests with the motive of having you grow. Same event, two perspectives. God never tempts. He always tests. It's just such a huge distinction when you see that. God will test and test and test and test and test, but he never tempts. If you keep reading in this, but each person is tempted, that test becomes temptation to sin when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. This is halfway through James chapter 1. Let's go back and look at the beginning of that. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith, right, produces steadfastness. Endurance would be another word there. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect, not perfect in the sense of morally perfect, but perfect in the sense of complete. A puzzle that doesn't have any missing pieces is perfect. That's the idea here. Perfect and complete, lacking nothing. So what is this saying? It's saying you start with faith, and then you're tested and your faith increases. You have more faith. And every time you go through a layer of trial and testing and the faith increases, you are becoming more and more complete or lacking nothing in your faith. I'll show you. When it says here, count it all joy, it's become my new prayer request. As we go through a trial and we're being tested and Satan is tempting us, count it joy. Why? Well, because number one, it's a command, and that would be obedient. And to not do that would be sinful. But second, because of where it's leading. I'm here, and by going through the test, I come out over here, and this is good. I want that. So this horrible thing in the middle is a good thing because it gets me to there. It's like working out. Most people don't enjoy the actual working out part, but they like the benefits they get from it, right? Same concept here. Here's another. Rejoice always. Give thanks in all circumstance, like when you get the bad diagnosis, when you get you're fired notice, when you have the not enough money, whatever that would be. Rejoice in that. Why? Because that is a test that will produce in you this great thing. How do we do that? Well, we do that by praying without ceasing. That would be one of the mechanisms. And the why is by keeping in mind that it is the will of God in Christ Jesus. I think that can be understood two ways. It's the will of God that you'd rejoice always. That's his will for you, is to do that. But also, all those circumstances are God's will for you. So you know you're at where you're supposed to be, no matter where the at is. You know what I'm saying? It's like you didn't get into the situation and think, oh man, no, it's okay. The Lord has you where he wants you. Joseph at the bottom of the pit, when his brothers were going to just throw him in there to leave him to die, that's where God had him. Then the caravan comes by and his brothers say, hey, let's make a buck, not just kill him. Let's sell him into slavery, exactly as God had intended, right? So none of those things are catching him off guard. Therefore, give thanks, rejoice in those horrible experiences. Why? Because it is leading you where God will want you to end up at. How do we do that? There's a good example. Hebrews 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, and this is the immediately following Hebrews 11, which is all the people of faith. Who is this cloud of witnesses? All those predecessors we have in the family of God that have lived out those faithful lives. They are witnessing us as we are coming through, and they're cheering us on to do that. And so lay aside every weight and sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance. There's that word again. The race that is set before us. Let us have endurance to make it through those tests and trials. Looking to Jesus. Why? Looking to Jesus what? As the example. Look to Jesus. Hey, he did this. Let's do what Jesus did, right? Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him. What was this joy? The cross? No, the other side of the cross. He's got to go through that trial, that difficult circumstance that was so daunting, he literally started sweating blood in the garden. Why? Because when you are under that kind of immense stress, capillaries start breaking and the blood starts seeping out through your pores. That's stress. I mean, I've had stress, but I ain't never blood or sweated blood, right? None of us probably have. He knows what's about to happen, and it's going to be absolutely horrible. And the horribleness is the separation of the Godhead, in the sense that he's still God, but there's a break in fellowship that's never happened. And he's just, Lord, let this pass, but not my will, yours. And therefore there's joy on the other side, and aiming at the joy walks through the fire of the adversity. And that's our example. In this you rejoice. Again, joy. Though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials and tests, right? You're going through these things, and you're to rejoice in that. Why? So that the tested genuineness of your faith, like a parenthetical statement here dropped in, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire. So what he's saying there is, so that your tested genuineness of your faith may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. But that tested, genuine faith is more precious than fire-tested gold. So how do you get fire tested gold? By going through the fire. And that's our task, is to go through those trials of life, or tests, go through the fire, as it were, and that's why we can rejoice in it, because we know that our faith on the other side will be greater. This is Job 23. This is kind of amazing. I just discovered this one. He talks about how he's looking for God, and he goes forward and it's not there, and backward and not there, and side to side. But then in verse 10, but he knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I shall come out as gold. When I have gone through the test, been tried, been through the fire, I come out the other side as gold. What an amazing thing. Give you one more here. This is to the church at Smyrna in Revelation 2. Do not fear what you're about to suffer. You're going to go through some really hard things here, Smyrna. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. Now, Satan is not testing them. He's tempting them. God is testing them. And for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Be faithful to death. Who can do that? Who can be faithful to death? Genuine, true disciples of Christ will always be faithful to the end. That's how we know they're true disciples. And so they can have joy knowing they will come out the other side. So let's go back to this section in James and we'll wrap this up. I didn't read this part earlier. He's talking about all these trials and different things, and then he says this: blessed, like the Beatitudes, blessed is the this, blessed is that. This is that same idea. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. When you remain faithful to God, when you're not blaming him for the circumstances, when you're remaining gracious to others around you, when you're just staying steadfast, you're doing the things you need to do during that trial, you're blessed. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God promises to those who love him. So that is an eternal perspective, that you will have that. But we also, after that trial or test, if we live 30 years beyond that, we get to go through that 30 years with a faith we didn't have prior to it. And that's a great blessing as well. So back to our main passage, John 6 here. He said this in order to test him. So back to my question, does God bring trials into our life when we are being obedient? Yes, he does. He does this to build our faith by experiencing firsthand his faithfulness through trials. It is one of the aspects of this that we gain from. So immediately after Philip saying this about 200 denarii wouldn't be enough to give everybody a little bit, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? So I want to just talk about this briefly. These little barley loaves, they think would have been rather small. They're not like big loaves of bread. They're just little loaves. And the fish, the wording John uses almost makes it sound like it might be like a relish type. It's a topping for his bread. It's not fish, it's fish. You know what I mean? Like can of sardines, think that, right? And you might spread that on your bread. They didn't have refrigeration, of course, so they would have salted or pickled or something. And this is a boy's lunch. So when you send your kid off to school with a lunch, you're not sending them out with 2 salmon or something, you know what I mean, or sturgeons. These are little fish is what I'm getting at. So you got these 2 small fish and these 5 little bread loaves, crackers type. I mean, they're not bread loaves. They're fairly small. It's the kid's lunch.
It would have been baked
Yeah, they would have been baked and just some, so I'm using,
One
matzah.
question, in the sun?
No, they would have had ovens
Fire.
and stuff. And then these two little fish. So that's probably, not quite realistic in size, but pretty close. Just that I want you to understand there's not a lot here, is the point, okay?
No, just real quick, all these years, I thought it was like a loaf of bread, you
Yes.
break off a hunk.
Right.
That's it.
That's the way we generally think of
All these
it.
years.
Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in this place. It's a hillside is what we're talking about. So the men sat down. I think everybody sits down. It's not like everybody else is still standing, but he's referencing the men because he's numbering the men, and the number of the men is 5,000. Now this is likely an estimate, not an exact number, but there's approximately 5,000 men in this crowd. Now we know there's a boy there, and there's no reason to think there aren't women there and children there and large families. So even if you just took maybe 3 as an average family.
All men?
No.
It was families.
Yes. So the point is, you would have a large group. So if you have 5,000 plus wives, that's 10. You add 1 or 2 kids per family, or 2 or 3 kids per family, you're in the 25,000 people range. Rough estimate. Could have been 15,000, could have been 35. We don't know, but it's not 5 is the point. It's a larger number than that. Jesus then took the loaves, and he had, when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish. So he is just dividing this up and passing this out to them, giving it to the disciples, and they're passing it out. As much as they wanted, and when they had eaten their fill. So I want to pause on that. Brenda and I, you guys have learned over the years, like to go fishing. Well, she likes to fish, and I like Brenda, so I go fishing. Okay. So the point of that is, when we catch bluegill, I mean, they can be, 10-inch bluegill, and they'll give you a decent fillet. But when we eat bluegill for supper with the 3 of us, we could eat 20, 25 bluegill. I mean, there's just not a lot of meat on fish. So these small fish, how many fish would fill you up with some bread and some fish? That's a lot of fish that it would take to feed that many. So 5 loaves, 2 fishes. This is not enough, but it is more, right? Where did the extra come from? Where is this more fish and more bread coming from? It is simply materializing out of nothing is what it's doing, right? Now, who can create something from nothing? God. That is an absolutely divine act. There is nothing on earth that can take this empty space of nothing and fill it with stuff, but God. So number one, this would be a miracle on a scale that is just phenomenal in terms of the amount of creative power that it would have taken to feed these people.
Chris, do you think they were more in awe of watching? I mean, I'm picturing in my brain like Jesus, like a superstar, like a rock star type, and he maybe suppresses their appetites.
No, not at all. This is he does this in such a way as to just, he creates the scenario, he creates the need, then fills the need to the point where they can't eat anymore. They've been to Golden Corral and they're waddling to the car, okay? That is an enormous amount of food. And he does that with 25,000 witnesses who are not just witnesses, but participants. You see a stage show and the illusionist pops the canary out of a hat. Okay, I saw it, but I'm not there. I wasn't holding the empty space and a bird popped into my hand. You know what I mean? These people are literally eating this food that didn't exist 30 seconds ago type thing, right? So back to my 5,000, 25,000. If we did just a small estimate and said 5,000 or 5 fish per person, you're talking north of 100,000 fish. I can't find, well, I did find a picture of 100,000 fish, but it was illegible. You couldn't tell what it was. That's not 100,000 fish, but that's a lot of fish. I found a news article somewhere over near Europe. There was a huge trawler. It's like, looks like a Navy ship. The thing is massive. And they had a bunch of fish die on the ship, and then it spoiled. So they just dumped it into the ocean. And so here's this ship, Navy ship, and then there's this carpet of fish floating, and it was 100,000 fish. So think like the parking lot out front of Blackhawk filled with fish. That's the kind of volume of fish we're talking about that Jesus just out of nothing creates on the side of this hill.
And nobody brought food with them.
No, because they're just coming to see the show, and then they get there and, oh shoot, what are we going to do? Well, they may not even have been thinking that yet, because as soon as they get there, he feeds them, because the whole point is to demonstrate his ability to do that. So back to, why does he feed the people? They could have just left and went home and ate, right? It's not impossible. They could have done that. Feeding them is impossible, but they're not going to die if they don't eat today. So he does this to display his power to create something out of nothing. That's the point of the miracle. It cannot be denied because there are so many witnesses, and it cannot be denied because they're participating in the food. I mean, they know it's real. This is not a hologram or a sleight of hand. No. This is, you couldn't, by the way, well, they really had baskets in the back and nobody knew. No. You're talking shiploads of food showed up. You can't hide that. That's another part of this. It's an undeniable, incredible miracle.
And they weren't near water, were
Yeah, they would have been. They took the boat over there.
Okay.
To manifest, the other reason, to manifest his deity on a large scale with thousands of eyewitnesses. This miracle kind of stands out by itself alone as just a remarkable miracle because of the sheer scale of what. He turns water into wine and nobody really realizes it. You know what I'm saying? He raises someone from the dead and 30 people find, you know what I mean? This is thousands of people literally being participants in this miracle, and the volume of what he has created is just incredible. So there's all of them if you missed one. And so now we'll work our way on through the rest of this. So then he tells his disciples, gather up the leftovers so that nothing will be lost. And so they gathered up and filled 12 baskets with fragments of the barley loaves left by those who had eaten. So they start with this little kid's lunch and have 12 basketfuls after everybody has eaten everything they can eat. Again, just incredible miracle. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Everybody recognized what just happened as this just incredible event. By the way, the Jewish leaders, they never deny these miracles. They're just too. If I'm standing here and someone just shows up and and there's somebody, you can't deny that. It just happened right in front of you. And so there's never a denial of these miracles. They hate him and want to kill him because of his attack against them and their power. But this miracle just is kind of astonishing in that way. Now here's the thing. So let's say Jesus he's trying to become the Messiah of Israel and take over and be their ruler and all of that. Let's say that's his objective. It's not. Let's say it was. This would do it, right? This would do it. Perceiving that they were about to take him by force and make him king. That is exactly what happened. These people are like, oh my word, yeah, this is the man. Let's, and they want to make him their king. And so what does Jesus do? Say, grab the robe and the crown? Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. He just slips away and is gone and thwarts their plan. Let me show you this. This is late in the same chapter. This would have been the next day or shortly thereafter, just within a day or two of this miraculous event. Jesus slips away from the crowd, and then the next time he's with them, he says, "For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats on me, he also will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like the bread the fathers ate and died. Whoever eats on this bread will live forever." Jesus said these things in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum, and many of the disciples heard this, and they said, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it?" Yeah, you think? That's a little hard. It's like, wait, what? And I'm not going to answer what that means this morning. That's a whole nother lesson. What I want you to see is, this is like the next day. So Monday he feeds them. Tuesday or Wednesday he does this. And they're like, wait a minute. Do what now? Keep reading. But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, said to them, "Do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all." In other words, you have to understand this through spiritual understanding. Your own intellect will not help you at all here. "The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life, but there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning who those were who did not believe. Who are those that did not believe? 24,500 out of 25,000, something like that. There's very few disciples left after this. And who is it, and who would betray him? Starting in verse 65 there in the middle. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one comes or can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father." He's setting the bar high for belief. You have to eat my flesh, you got to drink my blood. What? The only way you're going to do that is if the Father enlightens you to the reality or the truth of what that means, and now you want in. Otherwise, it's like, I'm out. That's what he's saying there. After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. Many of his, not the 12, but many of those who were his disciples, those that were following him around. So Jesus says to the 12, "Do you want to go away as well?" I mean, the crowds are just walking off. They're done. They're out. You guys want to leave too? Simon Peter answers him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." It's like, where are we going to go if we leave you? There's nowhere to go.
What's the this? After this?
Where's it at?
66. After this, many of his. What's the
After this is what he's saying right here. This whole thing about drinking the blood, eating the flesh.
Thousands hear him say that?
Mm-hmm. He's back over at Capernaum, and he's at their synagogue. Maybe not all 25,000 hear him, but he says that, and then what it's saying here is after he says this stuff, A lot of the people that have been following him are done. They're out. They don't
It's
want
not
this.
just his disciples, that everybody.
Starting to do that. But yeah, after this, many of his disciples, not the 12, the disciples are followers, people following him around. And the
Those
crowd
same
goes,
people as the people he fed.
right.
His
So,
roadies.
yeah, so here's my point. Why does he feed the people? Because tomorrow they're not his disciples.
They were full.
No. Sometimes these questions are rhetorical, Beth. Okay. Let me go here.
I don't know. Like I said, all these years I thought it was like
I
a
understand.
Italian giant loaf of bread. You break off a hunk.
So, by the time we get to the end of this, you'll have many answers, hopefully. All right. So John 6, back to our other passage here. I wanted you to see this, just to highlight it. Jesus knew from the beginning who would not believe, and after this, many of his disciples turned back and would no longer walk with him. That's the people he's feeding on a Monday, or having this experience on it's not a Monday, I'm using it as an illustration. So, does God bring trials into our life when we're being obedient? Yes. He does that to build our faith, but then next, trials drive false disciples away. That's one of the points of a trial. It's a test. And the test causes false disciples to say, I'm out. I don't want this. It's too hard. We've all known people. They're in the church, they're active, they're a believer like you are, and then something happens. Loss of a job, divorce, death of a child. There's something major that occurs, and they're gone. And they want nothing to do with God, and there's anger, and there's bitterness. And now if that's a season, and there's repentance of that, and there's coming back, okay, that's human. But when that goes on, then they were never really a disciple. They were this. The trials drive false disciples away. Tested, genuine faith is more precious than gold, and that is why we can have joy in the fires of adversity. Why? Because I get tested faith at the end, and that's really good. I want the tested faith. Well, how do I get to tested faith? Walking through the fires of adversity. That's the only way to get there. All right. Wow, I didn't even look at the clock, and I'm five minutes. What timing?
You're doing fine.
All right. So, got something in my eye.
A lot.
What did you learn this morning that help you have a closer relationship with Jesus? How does this change things for you? Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it changes things, but it has just occurred to me that it doesn't matter what you're teaching. We've done Revelation, we've done
Yep.
Genesis,
Yep.
now we're doing John,
Yep.
and there's a theme that runs through all of this.
Yep.
And that is, you will only understand this when God calls you and the Spirit touches you.
Yep. That's right.
That one that said,
Yeah.
just when you said those that the very next day they left because the Spirit hadn't touched them.
Right.
That same theme has run through every lesson.
Yeah. It's all the way through. Yeah. There's a spiritual understanding that we can't do on our own, and unless He does that for us, it's hopeless. Yeah.
I just want to say one real quick thing. Actually, your lessons, I go home days later and I still think about things because I'm
The
learning.
Lord
I'm
will-
69 years old,
Yeah,
you know.
the Lord will bring things to mind. Yeah. Main takeaway for me, I'll just give it to you and then we can keep talking for a few more minutes. He said this to test him, for he knew himself what he would do. Jesus will test me with challenges and adversity because he loves me and wants me to have tested faith. There are days when I really need that. without going into a ton of detail, the thing with work lately, I've brought it up a couple times, just day after day after day after day, it's just banging your head against the wall. One day, as an example, left the house, let's say 10 o'clock, whatever, drive 2 hours plus over to this appointment I made a week earlier, get there, work through the issues, we're ready to do this, and then the software at the company's website's not working properly. Which I don't know that until about the 5th round through. I keep thinking I'm messing something up, but it's not working. And of course, the lady's thinking I'm an idiot because I can't do it. She was very gracious, but I'm just saying, I would think that if I were sitting there and the guy kept, having to restart everything, right? My tablet's not working. I have to shut the whole thing down, restart it because it won't let me type. Go through all of that, get through. Finally, I give up. They told me you can't do this with this software. Well, this one's not working, so let me try it with this one. And that worked. Worked my way around, got done. We get done with it, and then I'm supposed to get a yes or no at the end, and instead it's, we'll let you know in 4 or 5 days. Well, that means I can't cancel her old one. I can't do this other policy she was gonna do. She's over 2 hours away. This will be my 3rd trip to go back to see her. Get in the car. Now I'm over an hour late to the next appointment because that took 2.5 hours and it should have taken 45 minutes. Texting to the guy that's above me in the business, and I said, she had this and this going on, and he's like, yeah, that's not gonna go through. She's had back surgery. They're not gonna take her because she'll probably need another one, and that's an $80,000 surgery. So yeah, probably not gonna switch her health insurance then. Okay, drive to the next one. These are people that called me and said, hey, we're ready. We wanna do this life insurance. Can you come see us? So I've got all this research this week and I'm ready to go see them. And we don't think we should do that one and we don't wanna do this, but let's do this. Okay, that's fine. We don't really know what we want to spend, so we're gonna have to think about that and get back to you. So I drove it 2 hours to the first one, everything goes wrong. Drive an hour to the next one, and then it was a beautiful visit. I really enjoyed these people. We were talking about the Lord, and it was good. And they probably will do something, and then I drove an hour and a half back home and got home at like 9 o'clock. And so spent, $40 in fuel, didn't get anything done, and everything at every stop just did not go well. And that's fine. Trial, test, minor test compared to having your child be hit by a car and die, right? I mean, that's a test. I'm not putting it on an equal plane. What I'm saying is that, on kind of that scale, has been just happening week after week after week, and nobody's that unlucky. It's a test, it's a trial. Tuesday of this week, I kind of had finally just had it, and just kind of never had a panic attack, but I think that's what happened on Tuesday. And then I was fine. And Brenda on Wednesday told me about, hey, I've been listening to these messages by MacArthur. I've told you guys she's doing that. He's got one right now called From Tragedy to Triumph. You should listen to that. I think it'll be really good. So I did. Revolutionary. You got some of it this morning. Mindset shift. So I'm living what I'm talking to you about this morning. Not well, always. I'm not joyous on Tuesday. I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what the heck's going on with me. But I'm now looking at it for joy on the other end. And so now I'm coming at it from that perspective, and therefore my prayer request this morning was joy, wisdom, endurance. And I think that's a good prayer request whenever you're going through trial. Let's go here and then here.
Yeah, I think as you was unpacking the accountable joy, right, and the testing of faith, kind of what you just alluded to with yourself personally.
Yeah.
I think throughout that section of the lesson this morning, I think it again just paints the picture of why these settings are so important.
Yeah.
In the smaller settings, smaller groups. rows don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, rows do not know, so we're gonna go into the service and those rows don't know that
What's going on?
Mr. Terrell over here had bladder cancer and
Right.
he had surgery, and he's always in a good mood, you know, and they don't know that. And
Right.
and the circumstances with family that Claire is stepping into, and her unspoken requests that are now being answered.
Right.
Those are the types of things that, again,
Yeah,
count it all joy, you know, but if we know we have a smaller setting that's walking through those things with us
yeah,
and praying through the week for us, and it just,
it's good.
it's a good picture of, we need each other.
Yeah, absolutely do.
Help carry the load.
I think my main takeaway was keep going back to how Jesus and God are providers, and this was a bigger showing of how He provides.
Yeah,
But it reminded me of other times in the Bible. The other one being provided manna for His people.
yeah,
Other times it's on a smaller scale, more intimate. Of like, I don't remember her name, but she was worried about something and she kept needing oil. And flour,
yeah,
and it kept
Elijah and the
coming.
widow of Zarephath.
Yes.
I don't know her name, but that's what she's called. Yeah,
And another time was the raven
Yeah.
providing food to.
yeah,
And it's just like, it's amazing how He uses.
Chris,
Like,
you're
even during
traveling
trials.
doctor, going from house to house.
yeah, no, that's really good. Here's the other thing. Do you think the 12 disciples ever forgot this event for the rest of their life
No.
when things were going hard? No, they're like, okay, look, if He can produce 5 semi-loads worth of bread and fish, probably eat tomorrow. I mean, it just shifts your brain once you see that. By the way, later this week, we received like 3 unexpected checks in the mail for weird stuff. Okay, thank you, Lord. Okay, like one was I'd overpaid a credit card and it was $25. And some of it wasn't that big a deal, but it was just like, wow. He provides. We work, but He provides. He provides. Good, good. All right, last one. We got to pray.
I was just thinking how easy we have it, and
Yeah.
listening to what you're saying, that's not easy, but these people lived in a time period where the
Yeah.
Romans were turning Christians into tiki torches.
Right.
And when He said, you're gonna go through hard times, their perspective of that
Yeah.
is totally different
Oh,
than
yeah.
what ours is. I mean, if the pastor said, hey, you might get pulled over by the police on your way home from church, and they're gonna find out you're a Christian, and you're gonna be lining up the town square tonight.
Right.
I mean, we can't, it's like,
Can't fathom,
you can't
right?
fathom that, but that was reality to them. They're walking by it, they're seeing this stuff,
Yeah.
and yet they still decide to follow
Yeah.
Jesus, knowing that could
Yeah.
happen to me.
And the why is because their faith is real, because God has given them that faith and He's the one that sustains that faith. And that's kind of the main point of Job. No one can survive what Job went through, but he did. Why? Because God is the one empowering that
You're gonna
faith.
take care of it. He's gonna take
Yeah.
care of it.
And they turned on him in part later because
Yeah.
they wanted him to be king today.
Yes.
And they wanted him to take the Romans and kick and take and
Yeah.
vengeance.
I was
And they didn't
thinking
get it.
of that. This isn't true, but I'm envisioning the guy with his barley bit going, "Crucify him!" You know, it's like, you know what I'm saying? The people that He's feeding with miracle food are the ones screaming to crucify Him. That's just. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean those people are dirtbags? No, that means they're normal human beings that have not been enlightened to truth by God. And so if you don't do that, thank you, God, for showing me truth. That's not me. I'm not smarter than they are. God has extended me that grace. Let me pray. We are way long. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. I think I say that every week. And it's not out of habit. It's just every week I'm struck by the benefit and the value we can gain by reading and studying and meditating on your revealed truth. Lord, help us to be changed by what we've learned this morning. Help us to see these miracles that you have recorded for us. They're so much beyond the feeding of people. They are displays of your power and your glory and your godness. It's not a good word to use, but it's yeah. Lord, bring us back together in weeks to come as we continue to see the rest of this week here unfold. I'm thinking of you feed these 5,000 plus people, and later that night you're walking on water and calming a storm, and just the flurry of your divine power that is unfolded in these couple of days is just astonishing. Let that change us, Lord. I just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.